If you watched my first short last week, you'll probably know that recently my girlfriend has been helping me out with some of the podcast stuff behind the scenes, keeping me on task, giving me episode topics, suggesting taking a fucking break every once in a while. You know, the that kind of stuff. And a few weeks ago, kind of as an aside, as I was talking about my findings with my Apple episode, she asked, "Huh, that makes me wonder about the differences in cheese and why they're like that." And before she could even ask, I was writing it down as an episode topic as the entire possible future universe expanded before me. So today, since y'all seem to like food topics, we're going to talk about sour tit juice and why humans love to eat it. Gross. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Waytat. I'm your host, William, and I will be telling you all about cheese. And, yeah, our update corner is getting really crowded now. We might want to see about expanding the space down here, and I might start doing excavations of that soon. But, anyways, now more than ever, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and also send in suggestions on how to fix my sleep schedule that doesn't involve going to bed earlier. That's unconditional. I also want to apologize for not uploading shorts this week, and this episode being short. Uh, I have had a terrible week. I'm not going to get too much into the specifics and details, just in case this gets back to someone, but our my the company I work at is getting shut down. So I have just a couple more months of work. So yeah. Um but also as always, make sure to check out Winkashika's streams for some cool VTuber shenanigans. Also the VTuber Polycule. And also check out Mystic Luna for your fill of stickers, jewelry, and resin artwork. And make sure to go to Canby this weekend to see them at the holiday market. Um, which they'll also be doing that next weekend. Just make sure to go and see them. With that, let's get into the show. All right, so like I said about 2, maybe 3 minutes ago, we're going to be talking about cheese and how it's made. But before we go on, I do, just again, want to warn you that this is going to get gross. So if you're eating right now, cheese especially, I'd come back later after you've eaten. You're not going to want to eat cheese for a while after this. So let's just first go through what it even is. It's coagulated sour milk. Okay, being more specific, it's coagulated casein, a milk protein that's found in the milk of any mammal. And yes, that means you can make cheese from any kind of milk, but two things. One, cow, sheep, and goat milk have a lot of these secondary proteins, nutrients, and chemicals that make them taste better and hold better. Same with like llama and alpaca milk in South America. And two, no, we're not going there, you fucking sicko. That's disgusting in so many different ways. But from that simple definition, you have a lot of branching definitions. Which is wild considering they were talking about fucking cheese and it has more widely accepted definitions and distinctions and actually important topics I've covered in the past. So if you're asking something like the US dairy industry, there's only 8 kinds of cheese. Blue, hard, pasta filata, processed, semi-hard, semi-soft, soft fresh, and soft ripened. None of which we're going in depth on because I fucking hate the simplified breakdown. Because one, I like to fill the void with my voice, so no thank you with just 8 options. But also, these aren't very detailed categories. So instead, we're going to talk about the things that actual cheese experts will use to categorize cheese. The first thing that will be used to categorize cheese is the source of milk being used: cow, sheep, or goat. Cow's milk, I'm going to assume, is familiar to you, so I'm going to skip what makes that unique. Goat's milk, meanwhile, is a lot more watery than cow's milk, meaning that goat cheese is going to end up soft and white like me, but will also be much more tangy and earthy when soft. If you manage to make it hard cheese, then it'll develop a nutty taste. There's a joke there, but I'm not going to go for it. Sheep's milk, meanwhile, being fattier, creates a creamy texture and a lot more cheese than you get from cow's milk. Secondly, is the moisture content. The more or less moisture heavily affects both the flavor and the hardness. Same as me. I don't I don't think that means what I wanted it to mean. Anyways, moisture content. So a very soft cheese is one that'll have a 55 to 80% of its weight being from liquid of some sort. There are spreadable cheeses that don't melt very well and don't brown and will rot pretty fast, which are cheeses like cream cheese and ricotta. Soft cheeses are 45 to 55% moisture and are smooth and creamy but have a rind. Stuff like mozzarella and brie for the kind of cheeses you're looking for. Semi hard cheeses, the state I'm in most of the time, around 34 to 45% moisture content, are some of the most popular kinds in America, like cheddar, Swiss, and Jacks. And these are really good cheese for melting, cooking, and snacking. Also, if you're taking a drink every time I say cheese, make sure it's not alcohol you're drinking. And finally, are the hard cheeses that are between 13 and 34% moisture and have been dry aging for so long they develop a granular, firm texture and very strong flavor. And this is usually the kind that we eat grated, like Parmesan or Romano. And now for the gross fucking part: mold and ripening. The amount of mold and bacteria in the cheese while it's aging will create a stronger flavor. And for some cheeses, mold is the primary thing that separates it from other types of cheese. But because, kind of regardless of your intention, cheese is going to mold, we're pairing together general ripening and mold ripening. So if you're going to get pissy cheese experts, you can eat my butt. Please. Now, soft ripening cheeses are aged outside in with mold, creating a flexible crust around more smooth or even liquidy inside, like brie or camembert. Now, wash rind cheeses are also aged outside the in, but are periodically doused with saltwater brine or a combination of alcohol and spices to encourage mold growth, which makes the rind hard and makes the cheese exceptionally stinky. And these can be things from Limburger to Appenzeller. Now, as a subcategory of this kind of cheese is something called smear ripened, which, ew, that brings to mind the exact image that you're probably thinking of. But this is basically where the cheesemakers take fungus or a mold solution and smear them all around the outside of the cheese, creating a pinkish or orange color around the rind, like Munster. And for specifically mold ripened cheese, there's two methods. The first, internally ripened cheese, often called blue cheese, is created by stabbing wooden dowels covered in mold into it that encourages blue green mold veins to grow in it. And depending on the mold, this creates Stilton, Gorgonzola, and other kinds. Surface mold ripened cheese, meanwhile, is similar to the washed cheeses, but is different because we're relying on the mold rather than the mold and bacteria. Yeah, I don't really understand the difference here, but it's usually how you end up with something like a Limburger. And from all this, we can create a cube of cheese options to create every practical and theoretical cheese possible for humans to make. However, unfortunately, I don't know how to make such a chart without opening a blender, and I'd rather not try to figure out how the fuck I'm gonna do that. But there you go. The road to ultimate cheese wizard powers provided to you by a man who had it in his grasp, but turned back at the last second because he didn't want to open a 3D modeling software. Although we can randomly pick a few and see if a cheese of that kind exists, so Let's see. Let's go with a goat's milk cheese with a 45 to 55% moisture content that is surface mold ripened. And we actually get a few options with this one. We get stuff like Chever, Chevre, Humboldt Fog, and Sophia, or a cow's milk very soft smear ripened cheese. And that would be Taleggio or Reblicon. Also, a lot of these are going to be European names. I apologize, although I also don't. Or a cow's milk semi hard cheese with internal mold ripening. That would be like a Masdam or a hard Stilton. See, you can literally go through the entire matrix and attribute or invent types of cheese. And here's the thing, the total number of cheeses that are theoretically possible to create that are all unique is about 387,420,489 possible cheeses. So, good luck, soldier. You might invite. So, good luck, soldier. You might invent a new kind of cheese. Do with that what you will. But sure, this all tells us how cheese is categorized, but not where it comes from or how the process works. Since, knowledge is about more than having random trivia memorized, and I am, after all, an educational channel. Don't look at my channel history, asshole. So let's first answer where cheese even comes from. Put simply, we have no fucking idea. Cheese actually kind of predates human history with no singular conclusive piece of evidence pointing to a single place where cheese was first created. Instead, we have vague shards of evidence, like from 8000 BC when sheep were first domesticated. We found animal skins and organ sacs that could have been used to store milk or curd them into cheese, which is gross, but you gotta do what you gotta do in the time before, well, anything really. By 5500 BC is when we see the first reliable evidence of cheese existing, from strainers found in Poland with some milk fat molecules still clinging to them. Which, look, there's an easy Polish femboy joke here, but that's just too low hanging, even for me. And only about 300 years later, dated to about 5200 BC, is when we see the first evidence of Mediterranean cheese making from Croatia. But all of these cheeses would be things like cottage cheese or feta. It wasn't really like a process that we had developed as a species to the point where it is now. But by the late BCs, most, if not all, of the cheeses we see today would have been possible and are, in fact, likely to be created. And became a massive enterprise in nations and empires that love cheese, like ancient Rome and Greece. That's honestly really all the historical context that you need. Cheese has been with humanity in some form or another, from the Japanese to the Inca, from cavemen to spacemen. And we're probably never going to be without it if the behavior of the lactose intolerant has anything to say about it. But now that we understand that cheese is old as the discovery of sharding your shorts and beating your brother to death with a big fucking rock, how does this process even work? Well, we're gonna get gross again. So the first step of the process is to squeeze the tit juice from a cow. So you're already getting gross. From this, we acidify the milk. And how do we do that? Well, the easiest way is to let it sour and spoil a bit. That's where the rotten milk smell and sour taste comes from, high levels of acid. But this begins to coagulate the casein proteins in milk while killing off any of the harmful bacteria that we don't like eating, especially if we make it rot faster or we add acids to it. And as we further acidify the milk by aging it, the proteins begin to separate out into curds and whey. The solid curds are then separated out to be made into cheese, while the whey is then shipped off to be used as a foaming, gelling, or emulsification agent, a flavor booster, fermented into biofuel, or given to gym bros that then powderize it and snort it for a higher PR. We use every part of the buffalo here. Now, once this step is done, the curds are then heavily salted, pressed into shape, and left exposed in an environment with a high number of microbes that we want for specific cheeses. And these bacteria or mold spores convert lactose into lactic acid, reducing the pH. If you're going for a more mellow cheese, then you use room temperature mesophilic bacteria. Well, you use hot loving thermophilic bacteria for sharper cheeses. And for some cheese, like paneer or cottage cheese, this is it. You're done and you're ready to eat or sell it. But most others have additional steps, primarily the addition of rennet, which is an enzyme complex that exists in and is created from the stomachs of ruminant animals, like cows, sheep, and goats. Also, alpacas and llamas, which, if you notice, is very interesting that the animals that we usually get milk from to make cheese are the ones whose stomachs can produce the enzyme that give us cheese. It's almost like there's a reason why we don't make breast milk cheese. You fucking sickos. But don't worry, most of what we use now is from vegetables like artichoke, weirdly enough, or are fermented, not stolen from the stomach of calves. Now, all of the enzymes help, but the one that's key to the process is chymosin, which speeds along the process and helps to curdle the milk at lower acidities. And this happens because it breaks down the casein, allowing it to become hydrophobic and coagulate, trapping more water and fat inside of it and compressing it into a curd structure, which makes the cheese better because now it has more liquids and fats and nutrients and stuff in it instead of it just being run off into the way. It also helps it to get stiff faster and stay stiff. That's what she said. But once as much whey is drained out as possible, and sometimes squeezed out, which looks fucking disgusting, and the curds are ready, they're packed into shape and left to age in a temperature-controlled environment, where the bacteria or mold we introduced earlier breaks down the proteins and acids into smaller pieces, creating a much more complex flavor. Mold and fungus, notably, also has digestive enzymes, which can make the cheese softer or even runny. This is also why cheese holds up for so long and why so many civilizations have developed cheese, because it's a very very easy way to make dairy products last a very very long time. Um because really, like, most of this process we had discovered really early on in human history, and a lot of the process is just like letting milk spoil and then doing like bare minimum effort to try to preserve it after it's already gone bad. So it makes sense that we would discover it. And then on top of that, since it's mostly being made better, I hate to say it, through bacteria and mold, as long as we keep an environment where the majority of the bacteria and mold is the stuff that we want, it'll stay good. But anyways, there you have it. How cheese is made. Look, as gross as I find it, I did enjoy doing this episode. It felt much more relaxing, which is something I need right about now, given how busy I am and insane life is, and that terrible, terrible announcement I received. Especially during this time of year. That's also why this episode is short, because I didn't have nearly as much um endurance for doing research as I normally do. It wasn't because of the announcement that happened earlier this week, but just because it's a busy time of year. Things are difficult, especially with depression. Um, but yeah, I mean, hopefully now you understand enough to be able to make your own cheese. Expand the matrix, and hey, if you invent any kind of cheese, a whey tap pun would be greatly appreciated. Even if it is just Waytat, but Wheytat. But anyways, thank you for listening. If you have opinions, improvements, corrections, or anything else you want to talk about, comment below or email me at waytatpods@gmail.com. And remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. And follow my podcast feed for audio versions, and come back next time when we talk about the horrors of getting shot in science fiction. Have a good night, don't murder, have fun, and remember, all cheese is moldy milk, but not all moldy milk is cheese. This has been Why Are You Talking About This? I've been your host, William. Good night.